10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 34. Hey everybody, and welcome back to episode 34 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. 34 episodes, can you believe it? We're really getting into it. And this week is no different. We're bringing you the Lick of the Month. This has been really popular. People seem to like this a lot. So I think this is maybe our fourth edition of Lick of the Month, but this week we have an awesome set of two Tom Harrell lines for you. They're very different, they're in different keys, they both do very different things, so it's going to be a great lesson on learning some vocabulary. So before we get into the show, I want to remind you to visit the website 10minutejazzlesson.com. That's the number 10minutejazzlesson.com, and you can find the PDF for this episode, which you can download for free if you visit the episode 34 page on our website. You'll find a little link to download the PDF. So make sure you go and get that. This episode won't be of much use to you unless you have that PDF so you can actually use this stuff. And if you have a minute, please jump on iTunes and rate and review the show. That does a lot to help us get in front of more people who hopefully will enjoy the program. And we also want to ask you to donate whatever you can every month, whatever you feel comfortable with, whether that be $1, whether that be $5, whether that be $10. If you're a regular listener to the show and you find it useful, please jump onto our website, find the donate button. It's right on our homepage. And when it pops up, please click recurring donation. And that will give us whatever you decide you can afford every month. It'll just automatically charge you for that amount. We really thank everybody that has done that so far. It's a huge help to us to cover production costs and cover some of the time it takes to prepare these episodes each and every week. Okay, enough of that. Let's jump into today's lesson. So I have two lines for you from the great trumpeter Tom Harrell. If you've never heard of Tom Harrell, man, you got to get out there and you got to pick up some of his records and start listening. Hands down, one of my favorite trumpet players in the world. Just amazing, tasteful, advanced. It's some of the best trumpet playing that I've ever heard. So we've got two separate lines today. What we have is one that just goes from a regular dominant chord to a major chord, a 5-1. And then we have a short minor 2-5 that gives us a little bit of half diminished and also gives us some altered flavor kind of stuff. So let's jump into the first one. So I got both of these lines from Tom Harrell's solo on Nardis. So if you want to actually hear this stuff in its original context, go out and find Tom Harrell's recording of Nardis, and both of these lines will be in there. So the first one, originally in the solo, was a double time lick, and it was over one measure of A7 and one measure of D major 7. Now what I've done to make things a little bit easier for you is I've lengthened it into eighth notes. So now I have two measures of A7 and two measures of D major 7. And before we get any further into this, let me play the lick for you so that you have it in your head. Then we'll talk about it a little bit. So a lot going on in that line, just a masterful shape and weaving in and out of the changes like Tom Harrell does almost all the time. That's why he's the best. So let's take a look at it. One of the beautiful things about this line is that really there's only one note that actually is non-diatonic. And that shows a lot of restraint. For somebody who can go as outside of the changes as they want to, Tom really shows us that he can play inside the changes just as good as anybody, and he doesn't necessarily have to go outside to make a line sound good. So the only note that's outside of the scale is the first note in measure 2, which is an E flat over A7. So you could either call that a flat 5 or a sharp 11. I'm inclined to think that he probably thought about it as a sharp 11. And then everything else in the line is straight up in the key of D major. But what I want you to look at is the shape of this line and how he goes from one measure to another. And he sort of goes back and forth between arpeggios and scales in a really, really nice way. A lot of stepwise motion followed by a lot of skipping motion. And the way that he puts it all together is kind of a masterclass in how to form a line. So you can see like in measure 1, he goes right down an arpeggio. And then the second half of measure 1 is all stepwise motion. And then his direction change is also really, really good. Then when you get into the D major 7 measure, I want you to pay attention to how he jumps around the scale to make it more interesting than just a regular scale. Again, there's no notes that are outside of that D major scale, but I really want you to study and come to your own conclusions on how exactly he makes that D major measure sound so good. And if you want to get a little bit more advanced on this, you can put it in double time. That's actually how Tom Harrell plays it. But I wanted to present it in eighth notes to make it a little bit less intimidating. Now, one more thing about this line before we jump on to the second one is that you can actually use this over a long 2-5-1. If you were to make it one measure of E minor 7, then jump to A7, then go to D major 7, it still works. So you don't have to use it as just 5-1. You could use it as a 2-5-1. All right, let's jump on to the second line. The second line has a little bit more going on with it in terms of tougher chords. We're looking at a minor 2-5-1. So most of the time when we see the 2 and we're going to a minor key, it becomes half diminished. And half diminished, in case you don't know what that is just minor 7 flat 5. So the first chord we see is G sharp minor 7 flat 5, followed by a C sharp altered chord. Now, we haven't really talked about altered on the podcast yet, and I will have to remedy that soon. But basically what altered means is we're going to alter every single note in the scale that we possibly can to give it a little bit more interesting of a sound, a little bit more tension on that 5 chord before we go to the 1 chord. And then in the second measure, we can see that it resolves to an F sharp minor 7 chord. So let me play the line for you, and then again, we'll talk about it a little bit. So that is a double time line, I will reiterate. If the double time is too intimidating for you, simply turn the 16th notes into 8th notes, and you've got yourself a long 2-5-1. If that's easier to look at for you, easier to think about, then just go ahead and do that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So what I really want to focus on in this is the material over the C sharp altered chord. So let's take a look at that. So we start on a G, which is the sharp 11 in the key of C sharp. Then we go down to F sharp, which is simply the regular 4 in the key of C sharp. Then we go down to E, which you would think would be the minor third, but what it really is a sharp 9. Okay, and when you see an altered chord, just know that there's always going to be a flat 9 and a sharp 9, similar to diminished dominant. So then we hit that sharp 9, then we go down to the flat 9, which is D natural. Then we hit the root down to the 7. Then we're going to go to A, which A is the flat 13. Then we jump down to the 4 again, or the 11, however you want to think about it. So if you look at that grouping of notes, almost every single one of those notes is altered from the C sharp 7 diatonic scale. So that's where we get that altered sound from, and that's where we get the name altered from. We're taking a regular C sharp 7 chord and we're altering it to include all of those tension notes and all of those notes that are going to make it sound very, very interesting. So what I suggest you do on this is you take this line, you play it really, really slow, you go on your iRealB app, and you plug in this key of a 251 as a new tune, put it on a really, really slow tempo, and I want you to play it, but you're really thinking about how it sounds. Most of your energy is going to be concentrated on, okay, how does this sound? Because you really want to get that altered sound into your ears and try to figure out what Tom Harrell was doing and thinking over this. And then you can take that altered sound and really start to use it in your playing. Other than that, this line is pretty straightforward besides over that 5 chord. So that about does it for this week. I hope you enjoyed these 2 lines. Again, if you haven't listened to Tom Harrell, do it today. You will not be sorry. And all of you people out there that are Tom Harrell fans already are probably shaking your heads yes. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Thanks for making the podcast as successful as it's been. Make sure you rate and review us on iTunes. And please think about making a donation every month. That really helps us. All right, everybody. I will see you next week. And I hope you have a good one. Bye.